Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs, the podcast for burned out, career-minded moms who are ready to stop pretending everything's fine and feel like themselves again. I'm your host, Christy Gamir, burnout coach for moms, licensed therapist, and mom of two. And I'm here to help you reclaim your energy, your identity, and your peace of mind. Whether you're lying awake thinking about the 87 things you didn't get done, or silently resenting the people you love most, this is your space to feel seen, supported, and not so alone. So grab your coffee, hot, cold, or day old, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's Christy. Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome our guest, Beth Wanner. Beth is the founder of Mother Cover, an agency providing interim and fractional coverage that helps companies maintain momentum while supporting employees through parental and caregiver leave. Having led teams as a tech executive and becoming a mother herself, Beth understands the dual challenge, sustaining business continuity while giving employees the space to be fully present during pivotal life transitions. She created Mother Cover to solve for both, protecting business performance while honoring the life moments that matter most. So I've invited Beth here today to share a little bit about her story and not only to talk about ways businesses can support new moms returning to work, but also to talk about ways that these moms can advocate for themselves and their needs. So Beth, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you start off by just telling us a little bit, about yourself and your work and what really inspired you to create Mother Cover?
Yeah, well, the inspiration behind Mother Cover is a really rocky story towards motherhood myself and the intersection of how motherhood impacted my career. So as you mentioned in the intro, I spent 15 years in the tech space as a marketing executive. And all along the way, I was always nervous about what starting my family was going to mean for my career. Tech in particular is very fast paced. So I was nervous about what any time away would mean for my career, as well as unconscious bias, assumptions that are made about particularly women as they grow their families and are pursuing these high demanding jobs. But as luck would have it, there's never a right time. So my husband and I eventually decided we would start trying to expand our family or start our family. And unfortunately, it didn't work for us. We encountered infertility. So we went through years of battling infertility, eventually went through IVF, all the while I'm keeping this a secret from my professional life because, again, I don't. I'm nervous about saying, okay, I'm actively trying to start my family over here. But as luck would have it, as soon as my second IVF transfer did work, 2 days later, I was laid off from my job. So I was on the job hunt as a pregnant woman. I was fortunate to land another VP of marketing job. Yes. Shared that I was pregnant after I signed the offer, and the reaction was horrible. And it wasn't what I was braced for. I wasn't expecting necessarily anybody to say that this is great news. I know that operationally it's challenging, especially when you're bringing someone at the executive level. But I wasn't expecting what I got. And then eventually it ended with me getting fired at 8 months pregnant. No hope of finding another job.
Wow.
So yeah, it definitely turned my world upside down. And then from there,
I can imagine. So you have really been through a lot.
yeah. So like I said, all along I was bracing for how motherhood would impact my career, but it ended up taking on twists and turns that I just never could have anticipated or thought was still part of our society and culture. And when I ended up sharing about my story on LinkedIn, I heard from hundreds of other women, and whether it was experiencing that same level of discrimination or somewhere along the spectrum, as I talk about conscious and unconscious bias and discrimination, just women who've been laid off during pregnancy, during maternity leave, or shortly after returning, or just those in general who feel like their path to motherhood collided with their career. So it kept me up at night as I was now, in addition to having a newborn keeping me up at night, I just kept thinking about why does this still exist and why did I feel so unaware of it? And so I put back on kind of my executive hat and thought about even this supportive companies that I worked for. Someone would come and say that they're pregnant, and hopefully you would say congratulations, but then the door would shut, and everyone would go, "Oh no, what
Mhm.
does this mean? Or how are we going to handle this?" And then again, whether they're saying that out loud or not, that is generally the feeling of this means extra work for me, or how do we navigate this? What projects are going to get stalled? What goals aren't going to get hit? A lot of fear about how's this going to change my employee? Are they not going to come back? How do I prepare for that already? And kind of making those assumptions. And then at the same time in the market, because there's been so many layoffs, there's been a rise in individuals who are looking for and pursuing contract and fractional work. So whether they found themselves there out of circumstance, but now actually really enjoy that control, that freedom and flexibility, they aren't going back in-house and they want that type of work. So the idea for Mother Cover was how do we marry those individuals who want contract and fractional work with companies that have leaves coming up, build a whole structure and framework around it to make it seamless for somebody to be inserted into that role, carry forward the work and the strategy of the individual so the companies don't feel like this is going to be a burden to them, or how do they navigate it and figure it out? And at the same time, protect the parent who is worried about their hard-earned career that they've built and being a burden to their team or their company and what that's going to mean. So that is my long story of starting what is.
No, but, like, as I was listening to you talk, I mean, it's for starters, I'm so sorry about all the challenges, to hear about all the challenges that you had to go through. I mean, it sounds like really what you experienced, to your point is, you know, very relatable to a lot of people. I feel like you're speaking to the fears of a lot of, moms who are, very much value their careers and are also wanting to start a family. You see these questions coming up a lot about, should I tell this person? When should I tell this person that I'm thinking about having a family? And the fact that it unfolded that way, yeah, I mean that's just awful. But it sounds like you took that and you turned it into like you said, you put your executive hat on and you figured out a way to solve that problem to really support these people, these moms, and these businesses. So that's amazing.
Thank you. And yeah, that was really at the root of kind of the hypothesis of if we can solve for those fears that the company has, which I know sounds backwards of uh, it really started with wanting to protect women, wanting to protect parents. But if we don't solve kind of that root problem and recognize that leaves do create challenges for companies, there's a reality there that we need to address. And if we can solve for those and think of different ways to do workforce planning to cover work, that I hope is what's going to be kind of that turning point of putting policy into actual practices with companies.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And so, previously, you've shared some pretty shocking statistics. You've said that, new mothers, they're compelled to return to work shortly after childbirth due to financial pressures. And at one point, you had said nearly 1 in 4 are returning within just, 2 weeks. You also said that a third of mothers have considered, leaving their jobs entirely because of inadequate support during parental leave. Why do you think the support system for parents in the United States is so lacking?
And I'd say that stat is from Parentally in the US, but it also a similar study was done in Canada by a company called Matern, and it was the exact same stat at the.
Mhm.
So you can look at both countries have very different approaches to policy, where the US is still very fragmented by state, has no federal mandated paid leave, whereas Canada does have a national paid leave program, and women can take up to 12 to 18 months away. But our cultures corporately are still very much the same. And that's where I talk about policy is not enough if people don't
Mhm.
feel safe enough to take that time away. And I think for both countries, what that comes down to is we're still very individualistic. And
Mhm.
so even though we say that we value families, that we value um, children and caregivers, we don't in practice. We think of that as an individual choice with individual consequences that come with it. And we have not built the infrastructure around actually showing that this is a collective issue.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, and to your point, so many moms for a number of reasons are going back, earlier than they wanted, myself included in that. Fortunately, it was not 2 weeks, but 12 weeks is still, very
Yeah.
quick. So for the moms who are listening who did have to go back earlier than they wanted, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that that strength and resiliency that it takes to do something that you didn't necessarily want to do. And there's lots of reasons that women go back to work earlier than they wanted um, to really give themselves the grace and the space for that of like, you are doing what you need to do. And that is a great example for your children as well, too. That's going to happen a lot in life, but you're operating within a system that wasn't designed
Hmm.
first, and just to give yourself that grace and know that you're doing what you need to do for your family.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So then what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions that companies have about parental leave? And then how does that impact, both the moms and you had also mentioned a minute ago about the teams that they work with?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest misconceptions is looking at parental leave or any type of leave. So whether it's to care for an aging parent, mental health leave, medical leave, that these are disruptions to organizations versus opportunity or leadership moments. So again, if we actually designed proactively for leaves to see what this can create in our organizations, how we can workforce plan differently, there's a ton of opportunity around showing that we can actually care for the individual while still being a performance driven company. It's not an act of charity to create a structure around parental leave. It's good business sense when you start peeling back the actual ramifications of ignoring this.
Hmm.
People aren't going to stop taking leave. We're even seeing, thankfully, more dads take leave as well too. So this isn't just a women's issue. And the sooner that we recognize that and build that structure around it, we start reducing turnover, burnout on our teams, missed goals. I had a story of a woman I met with a few weeks ago. So she was an account manager that went on maternity leave. There was no backfill for her. Her accounts were given to another account manager that didn't have the capacity to manage them. And naturally, that person focused on their own accounts. And the additional accounts ended up churning and leaving. And then the person who came back from mat leave ended up being laid off because she had no accounts to manage.
Mm,
So that has a huge ripple effect of not only a terrible experience for the person who went on leave and ended up losing their job, the person that covered for her felt horrible of I didn't have the capacity to manage somebody else's job on top of my own. And then
hmm.
there's obviously the business ramification of you lost customers for that. There is a dollar and cents ROI to be able to tie to if you had proactively planned for that person's leave and invested in the support that they needed.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about how obviously a goal for a company is to, reduce turnover. Part of that is, yes, reducing, supporting these moms, supporting the moms and the dads, supporting the parents, and helping them reduce that, the burnout, the emotional burden that you were talking about a minute ago. And along with that, I know that a lot of moms really struggle with feelings of guilt. I mean, I think we all know that. We all experience that like in
Yeah.
different ways. But here, I'm thinking about specifically in regards to work, right? So whether it's guilt around leaving their babies with somebody else because they're working, whether it's guilt around, not giving 100% at work because they're leaving in care for their babies. Again, there's that struggle, right? Trying to do both things at the same time. Um, there are a lot of moms who feel guilty even for wanting to work. And so I'm curious, like from your perspective, how can companies and leaders help to support moms with that to reduce that emotional burden?
I think that was even part of my struggle with deciding when to start a family, because I was somebody who always thought, like, I want to be a paid working mom. I want to still pursue my career, and there's a certain fraction who would not say that's the path that women should take, and it's all about choice. Of those who decide that they want to be stay-at-home moms, we should support that, and those who want to pursue careers, being able to support that and not having both feel this incredible, amount of guilt. But I think about, for those who have chosen to work or are working out of necessity, and how to get some of that guilt off your plate, is to start having these conversations. And I think a lot about what has been ingrained in us is that we're supposed to separate our motherhood and our career, and that you should leave that at the door, or uh, at your keyboard as you're logging on, and not talk about the challenges of what you're juggling, and advocate for what you need. But the more that we have these conversations, the more that they're small acts of advocating for yourself, but also the women and other parents that come after you, that um, there are just different needs that we have. It doesn't mean that we are less ambitious. It doesn't mean that we're not as great of workers. If anything, I think all those things that we often tell each other as mothers are very much true of the ability to multitask, the ability to prioritize, because now your time is not infinite, it's very limited, but that's not a bad thing. We just need to talk about that more. Of when I think about my daughter going to daycare in the morning, and then by the time that I pick her up, it's like somebody hit a stopwatch, and it's go, and it's how much can you accomplish? And I'm
Mhm.
very focused on what is worth my time, what is not, what's going to move the needle, what is not, and what I need to get done in that time, versus the luxury of procrastinating or doing some shopping. I don't, the things that would distract us before, when we were like, we can work till 7 or 8
Right.
o'clock at night. So I think there's a lot of value in what working parents bring to the table, and we just need to talk about those things more.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I completely, hear what you're saying in regards to you have that. I mean, there's always that sort of like set amount of time that you're at work, in the sense that you have your expected hours. But to your point, when you don't have those other responsibilities outside of work, you do have that flexibility. So it's not as big a deal for a lot of people to maybe stay later, to your point, working till 7 o'clock at night. But when you have kids, a lot of times there's very much that hard stop. Like, I have to leave by this time no matter what, because I have to pick them up from daycare. Whatever it is that I have to do. And that lack of flexibility, that loss of flexibility, I know can be really, really challenging for a lot of people. So I'm curious then, what kinds of policies or practices do you think can make returning to work less overwhelming for new moms?
I think the biggest thing is companies starting to focus more on a re-onboarding plan. We've had a lot of talk about um, transition plans, and the handoff of somebody going on leave, and completely missed the ball in a lot of ways for re-onboarding, and just being welcome back, have a coffee, and go back to work as if nothing has changed. And I think that also goes to the guilt and pressure that women experience, is that I need to perform as if nothing has changed. I'm expected to bounce back and be the person that I was before. And instead of honoring that the person you are now is evolved and wonderful and great, and as we talked about, those skill sets that come along with motherhood, embracing that, but then talking about what needs to change, whether
Mhm.
it's increased flexibility, whether it's a ramp up re-onboarding time, instead of going from being at home with your child to 8 to 10 hours 5 days a week again. Can we re-onboard that? Can we create 30, 60, 90-day plans that help them know what's expected of them, and give them projects that are um, a good way to start building that confidence back.
Mhm.
There's a lot of women are feeling like, okay, I'm this different person. How do I switch back on my work brain and figure out my my mom brain at the same time and a mom brain as a strength. I'm not talking about baby baby brain. But I think just being really intentional about that re-onboarding period and having those conversations and building a structure around that is a big opportunity for for companies to really create a better experience.
Well, and it sounds like, there are absolutely things that companies can do to support these moms. Unfortunately, not all companies are going to be doing that, and so when moms do return, and they might be experiencing a lot of, they might be having certain challenges and certain struggles and needing certain things that they aren't getting. And also, I know a lot of people really struggle with the idea of expressing these kinds of things to their employers, for a number of different reasons, whether they're afraid of what the response is going to be, how are they going to be perceived, how is that going to impact them, and so for these moms who are, feeling stretched too thin, they're really struggling, maybe they're feeling unsupported at work, but they don't feel comfortable having those bigger conversations. What would you suggest in terms of ways that they can advocate for themselves? What, maybe something small that they could do?
I think, not to sound like a broken record, but even just having these conversations is a huge step in the first place, and not coming from it at a point of confrontation of this is what the company isn't doing for me and what I need, but bringing it up as a conversation, whether it's with your manager, whether it's with somebody from HR, if you have an ERG group, that can be a good place to start, and just starting with simple, like, a lot of who I've talked to as managers want to do the right things, but just don't even know that something is an issue or don't know really what the solution is or how to bring it up because sometimes this can feel like a sensitive topic. So you bringing it up, making it a kind of a safe space to share kind of what's not working for you and maybe some potential options. If you don't know what those options are, there are a lot of really good community groups, whether they're in person, there's different Slack groups where you can meet other working moms and hear kind of how they've advocated for different things, ask your questions. And then I'm seeing a big rise in career coaches specifically for parents.
Mm-hmm.
A great one if ever anyone needs a recommendation, but she's talked to a lot of parents that she's coached through this as came to her thinking, I need to change my job. I need to quit. I need to make a big change in my
Hmm.
life. And she said, more often than not, that's actually not what they end up doing. They just need kind of the tools to be able to advocate and make those small changes. And they're like, oh, I actually do really enjoy my job. Again, I want to keep pursuing with this company, but seeing if you can get professional development funds to maybe get you a coach to help you have those conversations can also take the pressure off of your manager or HR team necessarily needing to know what the answers are.
Well, and I would imagine, maybe today we don't necessarily have the exact statistics on this, but from your experience, would you say that like the majority of leaders, the majority of, business owners, um, are open to hearing that feedback, open to having those conversations? I guess what I'm wondering is, do you feel like some of these fears that these moms are having more often than not, are they rational, or do you think that, people do want to have these conversations? They do want to hear these things.
I think they do want to have these conversations, but it needs to be balanced with the business's needs as well. So if we ignore that side, that's when it feels like charity. I'm like, I'm asking for a favor. I'm asking for an exception versus building a system. So if you're approaching it from that business lens and build more of a business case around it and be able to speak that language. And that's again where having a coach or joining these communities, because again, you don't have to be an expert at this, but coming at it from a win-win perspective versus seeming like again like you're asking for a favor or an exception is what I think most leaders want because they've got a job to do on their end too, and recognizing that um, I have found has more reception.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So then coming back to, when you were talking about Mother Cover and everything that you do, and the ways that it supports moms and businesses, for the moms who are listening who really wished that their company did offer something similar, what can they do? What are some ways that they can start that particular conversation about, have offering that better parental leave support?
It's kind of the times where I felt like my voice was heard the most is when I didn't personally benefit from it anymore. So if maybe you've already had your babies, but you're like, this is what I wish could be true for the women and men and parents that come after me, and just bringing it up as an idea to your leaders. And again, being able to kind of put that business case around it of are we tracking turnover from those who take leave? Are we tracking turnover from team members or sentiment from them if they've been covering for leaves? And here's how we can make that a really great experience. And here's who to talk to. So that's where I'm happy to be introduced to anybody. Our team can talk to them about that as well. I know there's some other really great organizations that are working with companies to kind of better understand how we can approach leave differently and build that infrastructure around it. So again, you don't have to be the expert. It's just starting that conversation and coming from a place of wanting to help your company be better as well, and helping those individuals who come after you.
Well, and when you talk about, it maybe comes better is better received when it comes from a person who is sort of past that and is no longer going to personally benefit from that. It sounds like maybe that can help to alleviate any fears or suspicions or concerns on the part of the employer, right? Because now it eliminates the assumption of, okay, this is just for them. It really is about the well-being of everybody, the business and the other people who are working there.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and I think that's why, in certain cases, why I felt more comfortable is because I'm it's not inadvertently me waving the flag saying like, "Oh, I might go out on leave again." So people who feel like they're in a safer position of, "It's not for me. I'm not telling you that I'm actively planning to expand my family again or take leave again, but I think we should think of this for others because it's still that place of vulnerability for somebody who's actively in that phase of life." Um,
Mhm.
to feel like not only am I going out on a limb for advocating for others, but I'm exposing something for myself that maybe they don't want to yet.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So again, it sounds like maybe by, being in that position, it can really just help facilitate a better conversation, with more open-mindedness and curiosity.
Yeah, or maybe there's a colleague on your team that has shared their pregnancy or expanding their family, and you want to bring it forward as an idea for your manager to be like, there are different ways that we can source this and support this. And often when we're talking to individuals, it's I can't believe this hasn't existed before. So it seems like it's something that is really wanted, and just like I said, it's awareness that there's different ways
Yeah.
we about this.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So, do you think, in addition to the things that we have already talked about, are there any other things that you feel like really need to change systemically for working moms to really be able to thrive in both their personal and professional lives? Anything that maybe we haven't touched on?
Flexibility is still the number one thing. So when parents are surveyed about what would make them feel the most supported, the two most common things are communication, on just checking in and having those conversations and asking how they're doing, acknowledging that something huge has happened in their personal lives. Oftentimes, companies talk about bring your whole self to work. Well, this is how to make sure that that is true in practice, and we actually mean that. And then the other is flexibility. So whether it's um, flexibility in remote work, we have a lot of return to office mandates that disproportionately hurt women, hurt caregivers, hurt minorities. Rethinking what is motivating that need to value presenteeism versus outcomes. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the organizations that can gear more towards outcomes are going to be the ones that benefit from the power of caregivers and parents.
Okay, okay, great. And I have to say, like as I'm listening to you talk and as, we're having this conversation, I'm just so appreciative. I'm so appreciative of you and the work that you're doing and you coming and talking to me today about it because to your point, change starts with the conversations, right? Bringing awareness. These are things that I do think so many people are struggling with. Obviously, just based on everything that you're saying, and I think that it's important for moms to hear these things, one, so that they know that they're not alone in their struggles, and two, to know that there there is support out there. There are, organizations that can help, and that change is a possibility, right? With the right tools and right strategies and right supports. So I really appreciate that. So for people who want to learn more about you and the work that you do, where can they go to do that?
You can visit our website, so mothercoveragency.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, our company page on LinkedIn, Instagram. We're always sharing lots of content. And I love when women, parents, organizations reach out and want to have these conversations as well, too. It's the best part of my day. So please don't be afraid to reach out.
Okay, great. And I will, of course, leave all of that information. I'll include it all in the show notes for anybody who wants to, look into this more and learn more about this and learn more about Beth. So before we wrap up for today, if you could leave the moms listening with one final message, one piece of advice, what would it be?
It would be to have these conversations. It's to bring what's in the darkness into to light. The more that we have these conversations in our workplace, the more that they're normalized. And again, those are the small acts of advocacy for yourself, but those who come next. We are a powerful force, even though there's headlines saying that women are exiting the workforce. I believe that there is a groundswelling of women who are creating new types of companies that are creating that life for others. But we just need to be loud about what we need because we deserve it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. I think that this has been so wonderful. I think this has been so valuable. Something that's just going to be so great for all the moms to listen to. And as always, for the moms who are listening, if any of this resonates, if you found any of the things we talked about today to be helpful, please share this podcast with other moms who could maybe use some support, because we are all in this together.